Awesome. So I'm Jeremy Watson. I'm a group product manager at GitLab, and I'm here talking with Sarah Waldner, who's a senior PM on Monitor, about her plans for on-call management and any opportunities for collaboration.
All right, so on-call schedule management is part of the incident management category. It's currently a set of functionality that we do not offer, and we've just started to imagine what that might look like inside GitLab. And what we're looking at here is a visual for a proposed data object model. So I've got Jeremy on the call so we can chat about risks, opportunities, who we might want to involve in this conversation to see if we can get this up off the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and describe the proposal and we can go from there.
Awesome.
So an assumption I've made in this model is a company is using GitLab and they have a project, they have put individual services or multiple services within a project. So a GitLab project has the repository for all of the code required for an individual service. They have then set up endpoints to send in alerts from the monitoring tools they are using to monitor those individual services. So IT alerts for this particular service are going to come into and appear in that GitLab project. Everybody knows projects live within groups. So there are two different structures I've proposed here. Usually, at progressive or traditional companies, you've got a group of people who are responsible for making sure that service, that product is available for the people who are paying for it. And so we're going to need some notion of a team. Members of the team are going to be the on-call responders. That team is going to need an on-call schedule or multiple schedules. But in other incident management tools, schedules, that's usually a one-to-many situation. You don't typically have a schedule that's shared between teams. So that would be a parent-child relationship that we could create there. So if you have a team, they're usually responsible for more than one service. So in this instance, multiple projects would be associated with that team and that on-call schedule. So an alert would come in, the alert would be within a project. We would look to see what team that project is assigned to, look for that on-call schedule, identify what time is now and who is on call now, and then page that person. Does that make sense so far?
It does. What I'm wondering if it makes sense to have like a first class object that's like for the schedule. Like if you have the concept of like a schedule or a rotation, and in that,
yeah,
it defines the group and or individual that is on call at any given point in time. And then so you can take that schedule and then you apply it to multiple projects or you apply it to a group. And then when alerts are like come in, you look at the schedule that is mapped to that particular group or project, and then you notify, you have the notification rule that's in the schedule. So does that kind of make sense? Because right now, like it seems that like you have this concept of a team, and like how we're thinking about teams right now is it's just like a group. It's just a subgroup essentially with like,
sure,
that just has like issues and members in it. And then so what I'm seeing here implies that like on a team by team basis, we have to define like the on-call schedule for each individual team, which I think could also work, but I'm curious to know if, yeah, I guess either approach could work.
I can go to I think that I don't necessarily need there to be a team object. Let me start with the experience that might make this a little bit
sounds good.
Clear. When I'm creating an on-call schedule, an on-call schedule is going to be made up of two different things: rotations, and then something that's called a scheduled override, which is essentially you are going on PTO for 3 days, and I am going to cover whenever you are on call in this rotation. So you can have multiple rotations, multiple schedule overrides, and at the culmination of all of that is your final single source of truth schedule that says these people are on call at this time and day. When you are selecting people for this particular schedule, I want some way to group or organize these members. If a team has 6 members and you're adding someone to a schedule, I don't want every single member of GitLab to show up in that list. So how do we start to group them? Could be this notion of a team, could be some other way. But you need to be able to have multiple services which live within a project roll up to a group of people that are responsible or just linked to that schedule. So the associations are certainly up for debate. But I want an on-call schedule that covers some set of services. Or they create a new service and I can say it is covered under this on-call schedule by Team X. I think the diagram on the right also covers a different use case. When a company gets bigger, they have less DevOps teams and they have more of a traditional NOC, like an operations center. And this group of people is responsible for maintaining everything. So any alert that comes in from anywhere goes to the NOC, and then the NOC manually routes it somewhere else. So how do we achieve this single central team that has every alert for every project in that instance routed to it? So that is why I created this image on the side where the team sits above the group.
That makes total sense. And I think the way that I always think about teams is they are subgroups. So if you wanted to achieve this, you can create as many subgroups and with an arbitrary number of direct members in GitLab.
Okay.
And so the first iteration, we should continue to do that. And we should have the ability to map a project or a group to a responsible subgroup that we can, I guess for the first iteration, we can consider just at mentioning or like the entire subgroup of that for that team. And then possibly in a future iteration, we can add like a schedule to that. So when we trigger an alert and want to notify, we can notify an individual within that subgroup. So I think that, the way of thinking about this is a team is a subgroup.
Okay. Yeah.
And there might be a separate object or a separate user experience for this team, but they are under the hood subgroups, and you can kind of like build with that assumption in mind.
Okay, I think that is a good way to think about it. So I could, I'm not going to be able to, let's just get another one on here. So something like, so if an alert comes into a project, we look to the subgroup that is most immediate, the closest one, the smallest one that it lives within. And then that group, the members of that group are the team, and the on-call schedule exists as a new object, first class thing in GitLab, and we go to that on-call schedule.
Well, the way that I'm thinking about it in my mind is, suppose that we have one project and we have that we want to be alerted. We want to alert team X whenever there's an incident. And so I'm thinking that in like the project settings, there is like an opportunity for me to select and designate team X is responsible for maintaining this project, or team X should be alerted whenever there's an incident. So, we're monitoring for alerts, and CPU jumps to 100% usage and stays there, and that we consider that an alert. So in GitLab, I assume we have an endpoint or a way to be able to signal that an incident has occurred. We look at the mapping for that particular project, and we say, team X is responsible for this. and then we create an incident and say @mention team X because of that mapping that we have between the project and this subgroup and this team. Later on, we can like map entire groups of like projects to the responsible subgroup of teams. We can, introduce like a first class like on-call schedule into the subgroup that represents the team to be able to @mention like an individual and assign like an issue to them. But that's kind of how I see that. So there's a mapping between like the project and the group.
Okay, I'm gonna make sure I understand this.
Yeah.
So I'm in GitLab and I'm looking at groups within the larger group, and there's the GitLab infrastructure team group. So I'm just gonna go in there. So on the GitLab infrastructure team, I have the core infrastructure team, I have the data team, and I have the observability team.
Mm-hmm. And if you look on the right-hand side of that column, you see 7, 6, and 7 members. And those are the direct members that have been added specifically to those subgroups.
Perfect, great, awesome. So then I could also have shared projects, so that's helpful. So in the GitLab infrastructure team, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's just call it, we have 10 shared projects, we have 10 services. Mm-hmm. And let's just pretend these are the only subgroups. So GitLab infrastructure team is the group. I've got 3 subgroups, which are my teams, and I have 10 services. And so within one of those services, let's just pick one, front-end security. In this service, mm-hmm. I've got alerts. There's not going to be anything here, but mm-hmm. let's pretend there were alerts here. An alert comes in somewhere, probably in the settings of the project, which I don't have access to. In the sure. settings of the project, there is a section where I map alerts that come into the service to one or more teams. Comes in, I map it to the core team. Once it comes in, I go look at the core team's on-call schedule, page who's ever on call. That's more than an MVC, but I think that is the first workflow iteration I'm gonna work towards. We already have the notion of teams in here as subgroups. We have shared projects, which means you can have multiple teams be responsible for a set of services if you want, or each subgroup can have projects just specific to them.
Correct.
Great.
That all makes sense to me. And cool. Right now, you can go into GitLab and you can @mention any of those teams that you had on the previous screen when we click on subgroups of projects. So I can @mention the SRE core infra team, and it will only appear in the to-dos for those 7 individuals. So that's why I propose like maybe the MVC is just like @mentioning or bringing the attention to the entire team. And then because we can do that now basically. And a future iteration is like adding in the ability to add a schedule or some way of picking out like an individual within that membership of that team.
Okay, Jeremy, this is amazing. This is great. I'm gonna get this documented on the Epic I have. I think that we outlined a pretty good immediate path forward. I'm gonna explore what it would look like to put calendars at the subgroup level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Somewhere. Maybe we need an operations section for a subgroup.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
This is awesome. This is really cool. That MVC seems pretty straightforward, and I'm really excited. I think that'll be huge.
We also have, we already have a calendar component that we use for epics and roadmaps. So while it's an entirely different use case, I think that we have something that we can start to build off of. I just need some relationship between like people on a calendar. So I don't think we're too far.
Yeah,
but
awesome.
Yeah.